Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Kingdom Hearts Final Mix. In the last part, we did a couple of adventures across 100 Acre Wood, catching up with the pages we've collected since our last visit there, and then we ended off entering our next cup here at Olympus Coliseum, the Pegasus Cup. This is a 10-bout tournament you're doing here, ultimately culminating in a new boss fight at the end of it. Until we reach that point, though, we got 9 bouts of Heartless to go through, all of which we've seen several times already by this point. Across the various scenes here, you're going to see combinations of Shadows, Air Soldiers, Large Bodies, Fat Bandits, Yellow Operas, Green Requiems, Bandits, Pot Spiders, Barrel Spiders, Search Ghosts, and even a very lucrative fight against 3 Black Fungi, which is really good for experience grinding at this point in the game in the case you're relatively underleveled. In fact, if you're playing Kingdom Hearts 1 and finding yourself running up against several walls and worlds and you're feeling underleveled, going back to Olympus Coliseum here and redoing the most recent cup probably isn't the worst idea to grab experience to get some extra stats or abilities along the way. The only barriers to you doing that will either be A, your dream weapon choice from the start of the game, as that does mean your new abilities might not even be helpful to you in some situations. B, your experience growth choices at the start of the game, as that curve can really change the amount of time you might need to spend here farming. Or C, which the earlier two lead well into, your patience. Depending on what's walling you, it might be faster to just readdress your equipment for extra resistances, or your abilities for more helpful strategies than just farming your troubles away. Mind, that didn't stop Kid me in some situations. I wasn't very patient until maybe late middle school, early high school, somewhere in there. I'm much more so now if my talks of Platinum Trophy grinds over the years didn't indicate that. But some of the things I did, despite that impatience as a kid, surprised me today. Like, I think my second time ever finishing Kingdom Hearts 2, I did at level 99. Entirely from farming a certain Heartless type on top of a certain mountain as early as I physically could. And I did that the hard way as I didn't understand how the magnet spell in that game worked yet. That probably took 10, 11, 12 hours that I could have just spent playing the game and finished it at an earlier level anyway. Kind of reminds me of some of the stories I've heard from some of my friends who've done a lot of shiny hunting in Pokemon over the years, especially one specific friend who spent, I think, upwards of over 1,000 hours trying to farm a shiny Pachirisu, and I want to say X and Y? I think it was whichever one had the friend safaris or something like that. Either way, they were doing that for a while. Worth noting, you might recall earlier in the LP, I took care of the Phil Cup's Standard Run, Sora Alone Run, and Time Attack Run all in a row at the same time, pretty much, as early as I could. That's pretty much never happening again in the LP. Well, I tend to play this game in such a way where I'm ready for the standard rendition of a cup when one first unlocks. Usually the Sora Alone runs take an extra world or two for me to reasonably challenge, and sometimes even another world on top of that for the Time Attack run. Thus, we'll be back later for the rest of the Pegasus Cup bouts. If I do have some recommendations going into this cup though, it's A, always have Cure on a shortcut as you really should throughout the rest of the game. This is around the point where you should probably actively always have Gravity on a shortcut, as it'll help take care of some of the larger enemies or beefier enemies, or even just chunk down boss healths that much more quickly. And what you do with your third shortcut will probably depend on what your build is or what spells you're most comfortable with. A lot of people default to having Arrow in their third shortcut slot, which is honestly pretty reasonable, but I tend to go for a secondary offense spell just for the case of range or speed, so I'll often have like Fire there to take care of things more quickly than Gravity can hit things, or sometimes I'll have Thunder on a shortcut for a long period of time to hit a wide group of enemies for good damage, which is actually a very powerful strat here in Olympus Coliseum in general, as it makes for a strong opening move in every bout while every enemy is grouped up at the start. Some playthroughs I even default my third shortcut to Stop, as it can really help you calm down some larger enemy hordes and whittle them down more safely. That last strategy is especially very helpful on Proud Mode runs. Ooh, Donald and Goofy both earned second win right there. I think that might be an ability I've talked about already in the LP loosely, because I think Tarzan actively starts with it. But what that does is it actively halves the amount of time that a party member is down on the ground when their HP runs out. This topic is kind of funny, though, because it kind of reminds me of something. While you can definitely see it at some points and in some fights or playstyles more than others, Kingdom Hearts still somewhat has a lingering reputation for being a mash X to win type of game. I never really agreed with that. The variance in ability orders, builds through abilities or weapons, or especially enemy mix-ups along the way, means you're often constantly on your feet. X to win always felt reductive, I think is the word I should use there. Mind, there's a good amount of people online who act reductively towards this series no matter what to begin with, but that's a whole separate topic. I think part of it with me is I never understood calling any game a press X to win or press ABC to XYZ type deal, because isn't that every video game by definition of how they're played? How would pressing X to attack in this game be any different than pressing A to jump in Mario or R1 to attack in a Souls-like? I suppose it might ultimately be that context really matters, especially in main story circumstances. It is technically easier to press X to win in this series and face tank anything along the way than in some other game series, but it's just something about the sentiment never really sat well with me at all, let alone the phrase. Also, going back to the game, don't be like me on this specific run of the Pegasus Cup, especially if it's your first playthrough. When you're in the second or third seeds, you might want to reduce your MP usage just to have more available than, oh, I don't know, 0 going into the final fight. After all, you never know when you're going to need some emergency healing at the last second against some pretty familiar faces. The fight awaiting us at the end of the Pegasus Cup is against our good old buddies, Yuffie and Leon. Let's start by talking about Leon. He actively still has all his tricks he had back in the Traverse Town fight. He has the downward swipe, the horizontal swipe, and his Faraga spell. But now he's also got a spin attack he's got around where he'll swing around in a full circle. And he's got a version of his Rough Divide limit break from Final Fantasy VIII where he'll dash towards you and jump up in the air with a slash that will then slam down and create a little shockwave. But also, around the time you reduce it to about half health, he enters a limit break state, where not only do his attacks get stronger, he does half of his blasting zone limit break animation from Final Fantasy VIII and extends his gunblade to, frankly, ridiculous proportions. You will be shocked with how far he can reach you. With that said, not for nothing, I think even looking at the numbers of it, he's actually really easy to interrupt in that state, just you gotta be really different about your timing due to the different ranges. Yuffie, on the other hand, definitely does less damage, but ultimately should be your first target for a couple of reasons. For one thing, she can hit you from a further distance, so she can actively interrupt you if you're trying to focus on Squall. Attack-wise, she can just swing her shuriken like it's a melee weapon when you're directly next to her. She can use a version of her Landscaper limit break from Final Fantasy VII where she'll actively throw a shuriken along the ground that actually will then fly back upwards. But thankfully, you can actively swing your Keyblade or do a guard at a good enough timing to actually repel that back at her to stun her. Just be careful though, because whenever Yuffie does throw her shuriken at you, no matter how she does it, it actively does home in on you. It also includes an attack where she throws 3 of them at a time at you. The only other attack she has on top of that that's offensive is a version of her All Creation limit break from Final Fantasy VII, where she effectively juices her shuriken up real big, just like Squall can with his gunblade in this fight. The real danger about this outside of its pure damage is that it has really good homing and will bounce around the arena several times before it eventually dissipates, so I think it can occasionally get caught outside the arena and you're safe from it there. The real danger to Yuffie and why you want to target her first is that she actually has a version of her Clear Tranquil limit break from Final Fantasy VII, which is a healing move that targets both her and Leon for massive HP. In my memory, it is weaker here in Final Mix than it was in the original version of Kingdom Hearts, but that alone should be the main reason you target her first. This fight can definitely be very chaotic, especially if Donald and Goofy get taken out pretty early in, or if you don't have a lot of MP, especially in Proud Mode, as has become catchphrase for this LP. In fact, most of the reason I'm waiting to tackle the Sora alone version of the Pegasus Cup is just this fight. It's a lot to deal with how many attacks they have and how quickly they can come on out, not to mention how they can potentially double team you very quickly. The hardless bouts leading up to this definitely have their moments, especially if it's tankier things like large bodies, but it's largely just due to this fight. And even if I could somehow beat this fight more reliably with the levels I currently have, the time attack would definitely still be out of reach for a good while there. My only other piece of advice for the Cups at this point, especially this one at this point in the game, is to play defensively even if you ultimately have an offensive ability set. Taking a step back in a fight to reassess things can go a long way, or maybe allow you to recast things like Arrow, Heal Safely, etc. Also remember to bring in plenty of good healing items. Mega Potions and Mega Ethers especially go a long way in pretty much any of the Cups. As while Sora's likely to do most of the damage in main story fights, Donald and Goofy can carry their weight pretty well here, and having them in the fight longer to either do more damage or heal you up longer can really go a long way. Hey Leon, I hear you like fire!
I can lose.
We're the champs!
For clearing the standard version of the Pegasus Cup, we get the Strike Raid limit break for Sora. That was great! Looks like Phil's trained another great hero. Is strength the most important part of a hero? Well, what you really need is a strong heart. What makes a strong heart? If you have to ask, you're not a hero yet. Stop talking in riddles. It's not a riddle. So, Strike Raid. Strike Raid's probably my favorite limit break in the game just to use on a casual playthrough. What it does is that when you activate the limit break, Sora will toss his Keyblade upwards of 5 times directly at an opponent from a long range, doing pretty good damage along the way on top of that. With that said, depending on your choice of Dream Weapon, route, or stats, it can definitely be very costly. 3 AP to equip, 2 MP to use at all. Something to keep in mind that may sway your mind positively on Strike Raid though, especially in comparison to Sonic Blade, which we got at the end of Olympus Coliseum's plot. When using Sonic Blade in Final Mix, you're only invulnerable on its first attack. During Strike Raid's use, you're invulnerable for its entire duration, which can actively keep you very safe from several dangerous attacks in late game. Oh god, here's a lot of people's least favorite part of the game. Okay guys, prepare for landing. Land where? In the sea? We'll drown! Not with my magic, we won't. Just leave it to me.
Come on, Sebastian.
Ariel, wait! Slow down! Don't leave me behind! Ah!
Oh, relax, Sebastian. They don't look like one of them. Right, Flounder?
I don't know. There's something weird about them.
What do you mean? They do seem a little different. Where are you from?
We're from kind of far away. And we're not really used to these waters,
Oh, I see. In that case, Sebastian can show you how we swim around here.
Ariel! King Triton will not like this!
Oh, don't worry.
Oh, easy for you to say. Okay, it's time you learn how to swim properly. Use the left to take the swim around. Press circle to rise and square to dive. Release them to stop rising or diving. Practice swimming with Flounder. Try to tag him. Alright, begin! Welcome to Atlantica. I think that brief tutorial immediately indicates about half the reason people do not gel with this world, myself included. Movement here is very awkward, and for some reason, all these years and playthroughs later, I still get the buttons backwards between rising and lowering here. Plus, there's a specific movement type down the line here I actively hate using. Combat is a little less awkward than just basic movement, admittedly, but only just. As you'll see in this playthrough, largely your best friend in this world is going to be casting magic, be it gravity fire or especially the thunder spell, just given how enemies tend to be placed in this world. I am at least very glad they give you this extended tutorial with Flounder so you can actively get used to the movement in some way, because if they didn't do this, this world would feel all the worse, frankly. Also, I hope you really like this 48 or so second loop of Under the Sea. It's as grating and annoyingly catchy as you'd think.
Good job! Now let's move on to self-defense!
Sebastian!
Eh? Class is over! Good luck!
Combat here in Atlantica is definitely awkward, but like I said earlier, not as awkward as the base movement, only because Sora does sort of try to adjust his elevation inherently when you're right next to an enemy to still be able to hit them. With that said, magic is still going to be one of your best friends here, because another thing that really makes this world really awkward is that you actively can't use most of your combat abilities because you just don't have legs to use them with anymore, like sliding dash, for instance, I believe. With that said, another weird little bit about this world is how save points and treasure chests work, as it's a little bit different than most. They're pretty much all hidden inside of clamshells. Those creatures chased us here. Oh no, those monsters might be heading for the palace too. We'd better head back right away. But what if we run into more on our way back? I'm sorry, but we need your help. Please come to the palace with us. The trident markers on the wall point the way there. We won't get lost as long as we follow them. Okay, let's get going. And with that, we already get this world's party member, Ariel. Ariel is the closest thing this game sort of has to a white mage, I suppose. She does have some physical attacks, namely a standard physical combo, but also a MP-based physical attack that actively spins her towards enemies, but frankly, you should probably unequip that and just have her mostly focus on using her magic. Ariel's main magic-based abilities are potions tied to Thunder, Cure, and Arrow. These abilities use the spells in question upgraded to whichever tier you found throughout your progression thus far. I don't even think I mentioned this in the postscript annotations, but that's actively a trait she shares with Tarzan, as his own versions of Arrow and Cure do the same thing. Also worth noting, while pretty much every Heartless we found up to now will show up in the Olympus Coliseum, pretty much every Heartless you're going to see here in Atlantica is actively exclusive to it because, well, they would only really work if they were underwater in most cases. As for our first Heartless here, these are sea neons. These jellyfish don't have too much going on individually, only having a spinning attack or a forward charge toward their target. But they tend to show up in very large groups, so be wary of being blindsided. Atlantica has some very large rooms, and what can be rather annoying is actively finding the chests in them. Most chests or items in this world are found in clamshells like the first save point was. Most of them are purple and have the same properties as chests, so you can't open them in combat. With that said, while you can open them like normal chests just by investigating them, whacking them with your Keyblade has the same effect in this world. Only thing is, there are some differently colored shells. The kind of purpley lavender shells are normal ones, but any other shell color, you need to hit with a spell matching that color. That red shell, if you want to go, for instance, requires being hit with fire magic in order to open it up. Also, the thing about most of this world's rooms being large, there are enemy encounters littered within them. It's hard to go even like 10 steps in any direction or elevation without finding a new group of them. Thing is, though, you do want to fight them, as the boss of this world might be enough of an issue that you want any experience you can get. At the very least, if you only care for doing main story, your first destination is pretty well signpointed. As Ariel said, just follow the yellow tridents emblazoned along the various walls, and they'll lead you to where you need to go pretty quickly. While we go around grabbing chests, let's talk about some more VAs. Ariel in this game is voiced by Jodie Benson, who also played her in the film. She also voiced Weebo and Flubber, one of the Barbies in Toy Story 2 and 3. Millennia and Rena in Grandia 2, Jenna in Balto 2, and Ava and Tatiana in most of the Metal Gear Solid series. Meanwhile, in Japanese, Ariel is voiced by Mayumi Suzuki, who we've already actively talked about in this LP. She was also the Japanese VA for Jane back in Deep Jungle. Next up is Sebastian, who's voiced in English by Kevin Michael Richardson, another voice who's been in pretty much everything under the sun. He's the voice of Dr. Hibbert in The Simpsons, Garo in the first Mortal Kombat film, Grimace in those old McDonald's animated series VHSs. Static Shock's dad, Robert Hawkins, in that portion of the DC animated universe, is often the voice of Barney Rubble nowadays. Drek in the original Ratchet & Clank, Gontu in Lilo & Stitch, Joker in 2004's The Batman, Shredder in the 2012 TMNT series, Bulkhead in Transformers Prime, Kamek in the Mario movie, and that's just scratching the surface. He's in pretty much any Western cartoon that's come out maybe the last 20 or 30 years if you listen hard enough. Meanwhile, in the Japanese audio track, Sebastian is voiced by Koichi Yamadera, whose name might sound familiar because we've already talked about him. He's also the voice of Donald and Genie in this very game alongside a couple of other characters we've yet to meet. What's kind of wild about Atlantica is that as a kid I remember this world being an impossible to navigate labyrinth, but it's really not quite that ever at all. Navigation is definitely still rather wonky here, even outside of the unique movement controls, but it's a much smaller world than in my memory. I think a large part of it is that I probably constantly found myself going the wrong direction or falling into loops moving around the areas, especially when you factor in these heavy water currents. These exist in certain areas to push you around. In fact, this one right here will even push you back out to the main area we were just in. I guess as a kid, I just basically didn't pay attention during the current areas and completely missed certain passageways and all that. Although not for nothing, as well signposted as the tridents are leading into our first destination, the boss fight at the end of this world is perhaps the most quote-unquote well-hidden in the game, in that it's just so weirdly out of the way in a location they don't directly tell you about. Now, a few seconds ago, I actively used the fire spell a few times on a red sea urchin. That makes it act like a bomb, which blows a hole in the wall. That hole acts as a shortcut into that specific little domed area we were just in from the initial wide open area. Not that I ever really use it, but hey, every shortcut you can get in this world is one you should take, especially if you're having issues navigating it. This little room can have some aggressive Heartless in it, but I lucked out and actively got some white mushrooms. These don't give you mystery goo or arts though, these ones just want a single stop spell to be cast on them, and upon doing so they'll give you some tech points as well as some MP orbs. Doing it to all three in the room though will make a new final mix exclusive Heartless spawn in, the Pink Agaricus. The minigame of sorts to get this enemy's synthesis material can be the simplest to describe but one of the hardest to do. You need to hit them with stop, and then get as many hits on them as you can before stop fades. The item in question only can potentially drop after 40 hits in one stop casting. With that said, for every hit you do on them while they're stopped, they do give more and more tech points. 5 hits isn't quite 5 tech points though. For instance, it's 1 tech point, plus 2, plus 3, plus 4, plus 5, meaning 5 hits on them while they're stopped is actually 15 tech points. They are great for EXP grinding if you can actively get them to show up. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 21, we're going to continue through Atlantica, and hopefully get towards the end of it in the process. See you guys then.